We just got some breaking news, some details of the White House's proposed stimulus and bailout plan to the tune of $1 trillion, Sagar.
Joining us now to break it all down is Director of Media at the Lincoln Network, Marshall Kosloff, and Hill political reporter Jonathan Easley, two great friends of the show. So we got some breaking news, as Crystal mentioned. This is coming from Jeffrey Stein of the Washington Post, some details of the $1 trillion bailout. One, Marshall, two separate $1,000 checks per person below a certain income limit, unclear currently what that is, $300 billion for small businesses, $50 billion for the airlines, and $150 billion for other, quote, severely distressed sectors. Already Senator Josh Hawley coming out saying that this is actually not enough money going towards working families, highlighting a dynamic that I'd like you to dig into, which is the right seems to be leading the way and tries to get more cash into families as quickly as possible, more so than Democratic leadership, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. What do you make of that dynamic and of the plan in the first place? Go ahead.
The real thing that everyone should be focused on here is, before we're talking about the numbers of the actual bailout, it should be the speed. When is this money going to come? I think we're seeing the White House talking about how these checks couldn't arrive until the end of April. That won't actually help people who lost their jobs. We're seeing across the country people who work in the service industry particularly impacted by this. So to the other broader issue, I think we're seeing senators like Josh Hawley coming out really aggressively, is that they're actually not asking. Senator Hawley and other people are actually asking for something in return. You're trying to use this bailout money to extract certain things, so such as switching the supply chains back to our country, such as making it so that we're not sort of outsourcing jobs, which sort of put us in part of the economic problems we're having here. So I think that the fact that corporate Democrats weren't as aggressive on their numbers of the bailout, I think really reflects a broader lack of ambition and a lack of understanding about the fact that there's actually a broader movement afoot here.
Yeah. Jonathan, what happened with the congressional Democrats passing this paid sick leave bill that had this massive corporate loophole for employers with more than 500 employees? I mean, it looks laughably pathetic in comparison to what the White House is floating at this point. And I recognize that Democrats are offering their own proposals, but what happened there out of the gates?
Well, look, I don't know. I mean, especially considering Republicans are going to be accusing Democrats of being the party of free giveaways no matter what. And we're in a crisis right now, and for them to be sort of caught on their left foot and how to respond to this. And, no one's going to be looking back on this and saying you did too much to help ordinary workers. I mean, the headline numbers are going to be, how much the U.S. is paying to keep some of these major corporations and industries afloat. But, if ever there was a time for Democrats to go all out to show their commitment on issues like paid leave, $15 minimum wage, extracting some of these concessions, if these industries are going to be getting these billions of dollars, it seems like now is the time. So it is a little bit puzzling that Democratic leadership in Congress wasn't prepared to really press these issues when it matters right now.
Well, and Marshall, some of the details in this plan include money for an airline industry-specific bailout, but also what appears to be $150 billion in just sort of an unspecified bailout slush fund, like for other distressed industries is all that we know. What do you make of that? And what sort of conditions do people, obviously after 2008, there's a lot of skepticism of the word bailout at all. Now, I think it may be called for in certain instances, as long as there are stringent requirements that, number one, this isn't going to go to executive pay and bonuses. Number two, you're going to keep people employed, right? Those are some of the most important things here. How do you think the public's going to react to that? And do you think that the White House is in fact going to hold corporate America to that tough line?
So I think that the key difference here between there's a couple of differences between 2008 and 2020 that I think is going to make the public less skeptical of bailouts. Firstly, I think it's pretty clear that no one blames the airline industry for what's happening right now. And I think when people see the headlines about literally tens of thousands of people losing their jobs, there's a very clear correlation between the sort of economic conditions they're trying to fight. In 2008, I don't think anyone cared that a bunch of people on Wall Street lost their jobs when Lehman Brothers collapsed. So I think there's just going to be a general, more favorable environment. I think that the question of the slush fund, I think that's actually fine. Because, part of the problem here is that I think it's better for us to overreact, to be overly flexible than sort of undercount things. I think the thing, though, that is key, though, and we really saw this in what happened afterwards in 2008, was that the politicians who are running this process need to be aggressive. They need to be aggressive. Every industry needs to be raked over the coals before they make any of these, receive any of those funds. That's sort of the key thing.
Yeah, I think that's right. And what I'm really focused on is, okay, fine. Like with the airlines, they could take, so Boeing, for example, wants $60 billion, Jonathan, in a bailout. Okay, well, Boeing was also one of the worst offenders in taking the money that they got from their tax cut and using it to buy back their own stock. And let alone from that, it's that if you're going to take the public's money, then you need to act in the public interest by doing so. And I think that that's kind of what we're seeing right now. And in terms of the fight, I think what is just so shocking to me, and it's what you were saying earlier in your question, is that Democrats are not using this as the way in order to enact an agenda they have waited for such a long time. I mean, the way the political change, everybody here knows this happens in this country, is it seems like a long, slow slog, and then change happens in a spike, and then it goes right back. And yet the people who have been around for quite a long time, who were literally in charge of the last bailout, the same Democratic leaders, they don't seem to have learned very much of the lessons there. What do you think could change that in terms of their politics?
Well, what could change that is, I mean, we still don't have the full scope of the crisis. I mean, we don't know how many people in the U.S. have been infected. We don't know how long the economy in the U.S. is going to be completely shut down. I mean, the numbers that we're throwing around today are remarkable for how early we are in this thing. I mean, the $1 trillion coming out of Congress, that's not going to be enough. I mean, this is going to be phase one. I mean, like you said, Boeing, a company that's a linchpin of the economy, of the defense industry, is so important in the U.S. They're not going to let it go under, right? It's going to take more than the $60 billion in liquidity that they need right now. I mean, they might need that today. So, this is anything that all these numbers that we're talking about that are astronomical. This is just a phase one. So, I mean, there's going to be other opportunities down the road to address this. But I would just, it's remarkable that we're here again, just over 10 years after the 2008 collapse, which really paved the groundwork for Trump and for Bernie Sanders and some of the populism that we see right now. I think there is going to be a more concerted effort to do it right and put some of these restrictions on these corporations, maybe end stock buyback programs completely. I don't know, but it's going to take some things like that. And I think lawmakers are going to have to be creative in how they deal with some of these things to ensure there's no backlash.
Yeah, and in my view, Marshall, and you put your finger on it in terms of the timing, the response, that's going to be critical. But in my view, the reason why establishment Democrats haven't been up to the task is because they don't actually have any ideas. They don't actually have any agenda or structural change that they really want to see in the economy. So they don't recognize an opportunity to push for something that isn't there to start with. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's so great to have both of you, and thanks for hanging in there with us.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Guys, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for hanging in there with us as well. And thanks to you at home for watching and hanging with us too. That does it for us today, but we will be back here with another amazing Rising for you. Stay safe, be well. We'll see you then.